They say hunting and fishing can be dated back more than 2 million years. Throughout the years, the historic angler and hunter has steadily evolved into the avid hunter and angler that we know and love today. Welcome to the Outdoor Defiance podcast. As you listen, you will hear comical stories, companies talking about their products, researchers talking about their research, and overall ways to help you become a better outdoorsman. Welcome to today's episode.
Welcome back, everyone, and we got the trio back together. Hopefully this keeps happening because they're pretty fun. But anyways, I hope you guys listened to the last episode, enjoyed it. Well, the last 19, I guess. So anyways, last time we were on here, Gunner, you were in Colorado and you had like 2 or 3 more days left of fishing. And how did that end up going for you?
Pretty much the same. There was like one area that was pretty good, and I mean, we wake up, we're like, do we want to catch fish today, or do we want to fight bad water and just try to fight through and catch fish at our other spots? We're like, most of the time we woke up and like, yeah, we want to catch fish today. So we went back to over by Cottonwood Lake, up above it, and then right where it comes out of Cottonwood Lake. And Cottonwood Lake was pretty good too. So we spent a lot of time over around Cottonwood Lake. We were told by a local that it was our last evening, or we probably would have done it. I forgot the name of the lake. I wrote it in my notes. I won't go find it. Blue something, a Water Dog. He said if you wanted to go hike up to Water Dog, there's good fishing up there. But it was like
I wonder why he said that. Maybe because the state record brookie got beat twice there last year.
Yeah, that's where he said to go up by, and he said that he told us where to go. He drew us a map in the sand, and we were like, okay, cool. If it wasn't our last evening, we probably would have hiked up there. It was only like a mile hike up there, which isn't terrible, but
it's funny.
He did say it was like straight up, so it probably would have been sucky at some point, but yeah, it was rough. I will say every day that we were there, it got like even like a smidge, like the water got a smidge higher, but in places it got a smidge better in different areas. You know how that goes. But yeah, we just rough. But
yeah,
we caught some fish. So
I was scrolling through the videos that you got up there, and straight up in the background of one, did you notice a guy came and like took a full-on shower basically in the water? Did you see him?
What?
A guy, you're sitting there fishing with Boone. I think your dad was videoing, and a guy comes walking across this bridge, comes down and like gets down, is like just bathing himself.
The water was freezing.
He like stood there, and then he like stood up and like looked at you guys, and looked at the camera and was like, "Oh, and then like slowly would turn around and walk back where he came.
I did not notice that guy. I was super concentrated on trying to like really exaggerate a roll cast or something, so we could, like really exaggerate like a pin over the top cast, and just so we could do that voiceover. So I did not realize that guy did that.
I was laughing because no one acted like they even saw that he came in. He just like came rolling in, took a little bath, and left.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. About that point. So the crazy part is we were catching fish. And about the point where the camera came on is when we stopped catching fish. So we were struggling. Right? We were struggling there for a second, but I finally got one. And yeah, it was a dink, but whatever. Caught a rainbow.
Yeah, it's like all animals sense when the camera comes on.
Yeah,
for sure.
So Russ, you and your brother hiked up to a lake and for melt off, and tell us how that trip went for the weekend.
It went good. We got up there and didn't think there was going to be much snow, and there was a lot more than we thought, but we still got in there, and we've been going to that lake for probably, me and my brother were just talking about it. I think we've been going for 14 or 15 years, and we've pretty much went it every year at least once, except for, I think last year was one of our first years that like one of us 3 brothers didn't go.
Yeah.
And it's kind of with brookie lakes, they're kind of like rabbits where they repopulate so quick they'll kind of kill themselves out because they just get so overpopulated in a lake and there's not enough food. And so we kind of luckily we kind of lived through the high times of that lake, and sadly it's starting to go back downhill, but it's fun because you're still catching a lot bigger brookies on average than most people catch in lakes, and just the numbers, it's wild. It's a lot of fun. But yeah, we probably
So,
I don't go ahead.
Oh, you go ahead.
We got there Friday night and then stayed through Sunday morning, and I bet Saturday we probably caught, between me and my brother, we probably caught 50, 60 fish a piece. So I mean, it was, yeah, it's a special place.
So
Must be nice.
is that the place that it used to? You told me that it got too overpopulated and then it went downhill, or is that a different lake? I've heard you talk about this before.
No, it's definitely this one. I mean, it's not. Don't let me make it sound terrible. It's still dang good fishing, and I mean, we were still catching quite a few that were 17, 18-inch brookies. So I mean, that's a good brookie for Colorado, but it's definitely, it's not what it was. But like I said, we luckily lived through the high time of that lake and got to experience it. So
how are you fishing for them?
So we pack in our belly boats all the time, and then we're fly fishing with streamers for them. That's part of the reason why the fish in there have always been pretty good size, is they're kind of a little freshwater bait fish. They're called sculpins.
Yeah.
I don't really know they're ugly little things, but that lake actually has quite a few sculpins in it. And so when we first started going in, we started tying our own streamers and called them the Russ Special. And we pretty much mimicked those sculpins that we'd always see in there as much close as we could. And it's like taking candy from a baby.
Yeah. There's a lot of sculpin over at the White River. That's what they tell you if you're not like fly. You can streamer fish with, like, they have sculpin flies in those fly shops there.
Yep.
Other people put sculpins on and throw them out deep. And
are you talking about? You're talking about Arkansas, right?
Mm-hmm, the White River in Arkansas.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Over by like Flippin and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Mountain Home, that area. They have a bunch of sculpin in there, and so if we wanted to go fish for them with the sculpin, this is before I fly fished a whole lot, we'd grab like a piece of line with a little bitty hook on it, and just put a little bitty piece of worm on there and just stick it in different rock holes on the bank. We catch those sculpin that way. So we did it. But yeah, it's funny that they got sculpin up there too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because that's like, they're supposedly in a lot of lakes, but like I've never hardly seen them. But for whatever reason in this lake, I mean, if you go by the inlet of it, you pretty often are going to see them swimming around. So it just seems, which it makes sense because like the quality and the quantity of fish in there has always been really high compared to other lakes we go to.
So that's what I'm going to ask that question. I was going to ask something like that too, because I was watching the video. You guys were, casting out and then would rip a little bit and then let it sink and then rip. Are you fishing like depth? Or are you trying to fish more or like, like a foot, 2 foot down? Or are you more like trying to hit the bottom with those?
So they stay pretty low to the bottom, but it kind of, honestly, at that lake, it depends. And most high country lakes we fish, but especially that one, it kind of depends on like day to day, but really kind of like year to year for us. Like some years you'll go in there and you better be putting that fly like 6 inches from the bank, and then you're going to do a couple quick strips, and they're either going to hit it right on the bank or they're not going to hit it at all. And this last weekend we got a little bit of, and then, well, before I say this, and then the other way we catch them a lot is if they're not doing that right on the bank, you got to be getting out into like 10, 12 feet of water. And really, by a lot of our friends that go with us, why they don't do super great is like they're not patient enough. And so, because I mean, you're not throwing a ton of weight with the fly rod, obviously. And so you have to really, if they're not right on the shore, you got to really be patient and let those streamers sink down in there and do a lot slower strips and everything, just so your fly will get down in there deeper. And this weekend, it was kind of funny. Like Saturday morning, we were basically just hammering them right tight to the bank. Like I said, your first 2-3 feet off the bank, you were catching most of the fish. And then as the day went on, which I mean, it makes sense. It was getting warmer. They were kind of going deeper. And so like middle of the day, and that's another reason I love that lake. Like most lakes, it shuts down middle of the day and you're not going to catch much. I don't care what. Me and Tyler were out there at 1:30 in the afternoon, still just absolutely hammering them. I mean,
Yeah.
and like I was saying, we had to start fishing them deeper, but we were still just destroying them. So it was fun for sure.
Yeah, I was watching those videos, and I was just like casting out and just chilling there, and it was just ripping slowly every once in a while.
Yep.
And then
And it's funny, like they can be so finicky, and such like a small little change can all of a sudden let you start catching them. Cause like early in the morning, we were basically, and you probably saw in the video, Taylor, like we'd basically go like 1, 2, and stripping pretty fast. And then about 1:30 when we started fishing for them again, that would not work at all. And all of a sudden we went to going like, dun, 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 like 3 little short little strips. And then we started hammering them again. So just
That's
like
crazy.
the little change in how you were stripping completely just started hammering them again. It was weird. And I mean, we experienced that a lot, but go ahead, Gunnar.
Do you use, cause I haven't got into the whole lot of lake fly fishing yet. I'd like to. Do you use like a different kind of do you use like a sink line, or are you still using kind of the same kind of float line when you do that kind of stuff? Or
We have in the past, and like I said, sometimes when they're out in the deep water, it's nice to have either a sink tip or like full sinking line. My brother Tyler used to pack some in with us when we'd go to that lake. I really don't think it makes that big of at least at this lake. I'm not going to speak for everything, because there are definitely times that, like, if you're fishing super deep water with a fly rod, you're going to have to use sinking line. But we're usually just still using our same floating line. I mean, every once in a while, we usually tie our streamers that we tie ourselves pretty dang heavy, so like they're gonna sink pretty good. But Tyler's had a lot of success in the past. Like if we're not catching them shallow, he can go just troll around through the middle of that lake with a sink tip, or you don't have to you don't have to be as patient trying to catch them in that deeper water, because your stuff's gonna sink quicker. But we typically, I mean, in the last 5-6 years, I don't think any of us have brought sinking line in there.
Okay.
So how's that trip kind of set up? Do you guys hike into it? Do you camp the whole weekend? Do you take food? Do you eat the trout you catch? Kind of give us that picture.
So that specific lake's about a 6.5 mile hike. And so we usually try to go in, and like I said, we try to hit it at ice off, like you mentioned. And so it's a long, miserable hike through the snow. And we usually try to hit it either super early morning or super late, like leave the truck at like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night and hike through the night. Just because usually then we're still getting temperatures where that snow's crusting up. So even if you're on 6-8 feet of snow, like you're staying on top of it, not post holing through it. We decided this year to leave work at like noon, and we got there at like 3:30 and started hiking in, and thought it was going to be miserable. And I don't know why, by the grace of God, but that snow was probably the best we've ever walked on. It was just super hard the whole way. But yeah, so we hike in, usually have a tent, and then we'll stay. It depends. We got in a bad habit when we were kind of in our early 20s that we'd get in there on a Friday, stay Friday night. Saturday we'd fish in the morning, and then midday up there when you're backpacking, it's a long, miserable day because the fishing's usually not super great. And so we got in a bad habit where we'd be sitting there, and there's a Pizza Hut in the town where we drive through to get there. And we'd always be like, man, a Mountain Dew and a pizza sounds pretty good right now. So we'd get caught up, and everyone would be like packing your stuff as quick as we could to make it out before they close. But typically we try to stay through Sunday morning. We usually don't fish Sunday morning much except for off the bank, just because, like I said, we bring our belly boats in, and those things, man, they soak up a bunch of water. And if you fish Sunday morning, like you don't have time for them to dry out before you pack them out. So, I mean, you're adding quite a few pounds onto your pack. So usually we try to fish Friday night, all day Saturday, and then let them dry out Sunday morning while we're packing. But then, yeah, as far as food, honestly, when we were younger, we got real into the freeze dried stuff just because it's so light. But then we ate so much of it, kind of got sick of it. So now which is funny, in our older age, you'd think we'd want to be going lighter. But now I like to think we're smarter and we just sacrifice it and pack in actual good food.
Yeah.
So we do a little mixture of a few freeze dried meals, but then, I mean, one of my brother Tyler, his best thing he ever came up with was going to Walmart and buying a whole loaf of French bread for $1 from the bakery.
Yeah.
And we just smash it down flat and throw it in the pack. And then we usually pack in a little summer sausage and a block of cheese. And like I said, there's always snow. So, I mean, you can pack in whatever cold you want. As soon as you get it there, you just throw it in the snowbank and it stays good all weekend. And so, man, you do one of those little sandwiches with the French bread and some summer sausage and a little slice of cheese and warm it up by the fire and kind of melt it. It sure beats the heck out of mountain houses. But, yeah. And then as far as you asking about eating fish, I'll usually pack in like an onion and a lemon and some tin foil, and we'll do fish like one night while we're in there. I wish more people that go to that lake would start taking more fish out because it dang sure needs it, because that lake's starting to kill itself, like I said, but it is what it is.
Is there meat like orange, like salmon, for being that high in altitude, or?
Yeah. Most of the high country lakes, they're a lot more like orange kind of red. And especially, I don't know what it is about that lake, but those are like the most blood red trout meat I have ever seen in my life. I should have taken a picture this weekend because we kept a couple for lunch on Saturday, but it's pretty similar to getting like fresh salmon. They're so red.
Do they have more like of a reddish tint than even like the ones we catch at Buttermilk?
Yeah, it kind of depends, because honestly, most of the time, yes. You do get the odd one, like one of the two that we kept for lunch on Saturday. I started filleting into it, and I looked at my brother, and I was like, oh my gosh, this one's not red at all. Like, it looked like a trout from down here low, but most of them, that's the rare thing, because most of them are like blood red, super dark.
How high of altitude were you in?
Oh man, I don't even know if I've ever honestly looked. I know you're pushing up towards like 10,000 feet for sure where we're at.
How long does it take you to get there typically? If you once you start, if you're, let's say, an average day, because there's some days you're just feeling it, you're just rolling up there, but like an average, how long does it typically take you guys to get on up there?
I'd say this was a pretty average trip this time, because I just came from sea level for a month in Alaska. So I was not in shape at all, and it took us it was right around 2 hours to get in there.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I mean, we've also made it in there in like an hour and a half or a little less, but this time was definitely not that trip.
Is it pretty much straight, like uphill, or kind of a mixture?
No, so on the way in, about the first probably 5 miles of it, it's an old logging road. And so it's pretty just mellow and like through big meadows and stuff. And like there's some gradual climbs and stuff that kind of kick your butt. And the worst part is that's all through the trees. And so there's usually huge snow drifts through there. Then right as you get to the lake, you literally climb straight. It's like the last mile of the hike. There's a big ridge, because basically this lake sits in like a big basin. And you basically have to climb straight up the one side of this ridge and then straight back off the other side. And so on the way in, it sucks because you have 5 miles under your belt already, and then you have that last big hill. And then on the way out, it really sucks because we usually leave Sunday morning, and you've been hanging out all weekend. You're already tired from the hike in, so you're not warmed up at all, and you have to go straight up that mountain and straight back down the other side. And then after that, have 5 miles out. I mean, on the way out, a lot of it's down, kind of gradual downhill, but it's a long hike for sure.
Yeah. Is it worse or equivalent to Buttermilk?
The last mountain is worse, but then you got to add 5 miles onto that too. And a hell of a lot more snow.
How far is Buttermilk? Like usually is that hike? I
It
didn't
depends
really
on the year because they
equate.
keep closing the trail farther back. But
That's true. Yeah.
probably the year you guys went with me, it's to just where you hit the creek. It's probably mile and a half, probably.
Okay.
Really? That's
I
it?
mean,
I
yeah.
was hoping you'd say that. I was hoping you were going to be like, oh, it's only like half a mile. I would have
No,
felt like
shoot, when we were kids, it was only like half a mile.
really.
Yeah, because you know where we drop in and you first start getting into like the steep canyon part.
Mm-hmm.
You used to be able to drive almost right to there.
Oh, wow.
So all that upper stuff you didn't have to drive or walk through.
Hmm.
I mean, there's still people that do drive down there, but it's not legal. I'm always jealous of them though.
Me too.
Dang it, if I was an outlaw.
When we walk past their truck and still have a mile to hike out after that, I'm like, wish I wasn't such a good person.
The lake you went to this weekend, is that the lake you and Jade stopped or were going to last year and I got out and started walking in and there was like 2 bears?
No, that was going into Buttermilk.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But speaking of bears, we've never seen any bear sign. We've seen a little bit, but not much on this trail going into this lake. And this weekend, oh my God, there was fresh bear tracks freaking everywhere. We were coming out Sunday morning and going up this little snowbank, and like everything was melting around, so it was super muddy. But like it was so warm that if it within like a couple hours, all the tracks would kind of start melting out, Well, we're coming out that morning and we're both we had music playing, our heads down, we're tired because it was like halfway through the hike out. And my brother looks at me and he goes, damn, that's a bear track, isn't it? And I looked up and I was like, yeah. And I was like, pretty fresh too. And he goes, yeah. And like you could still see the mud on its pads on the snow and everything. And we were just like, we're right behind this one. He was somewhere there close. So we shut the music off and we're paying attention a little more.
Did you have your pistol with you this trip?
We had 2 of them.
Not just a frying pan.
We were ready this time.
Yeah. That might be one of my favorite stories you've ever told, was just sprinting down the mountain with a frying pan.
That was a rough night.
I was like, man, I don't even know what I'd do in that situation. I'd probably be running too, but
it's the first time I've ever jogged out of a high mountain lake, that's for sure.
I remember that time we were there and we were all like split up fishing because there's several of us, so we were hitting 2 holes. Remember when we came to meet back and there was that fresh bear track right in the middle, but none of us ever saw the bear.
Yeah.
Yeah. I fell in the river.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys knew that. When I was like off by myself, I like stepped on a big rock and there was like moss there. And it's like one of those cartoon falls where it just goes boom, boom. And I just like did that. And it was like a slow fall. And I was like, well, I'm falling in the river or creek, whatever. And I just go down into that thing. Yeah. I go down into that thing and I'm like, please, dear Lord, please have this fly rod be okay. And it was, but I was like, well, that hurt a little bit, but it hurt my pride more than it hurt me. So no one saw it, but I definitely fell into the creek that day.
Was that when we went?
Yeah. I fell from like high. Like I'm surprised I didn't hurt myself. Like I was dropping down into this thing.
Funny.
It was just when I was catching fish. It was just when I figured out how that thing worked. I'd be sitting there and Russ is like, there's a fish on that. I'm like, what? Just when I figured out how those fish, bit and stuff in there and how that worked. Just when that happened, I go off my own and I freaking tumble into that thing. I'm like, okay.
Remember when my shoe came off and I floated down the river to catch it?
Yeah.
I floated belly first and like crawled to try to catch up with my shoe because there's no way I was walking across all those rocks without it. And as I was going, my shins were banging off rocks. I looked like I was in a fight when I got down there the next day. We need to go back. We haven't been in 3 or 4 years.
Respected. I mean, going down, I was like, this isn't that bad. Then going up, you're like, yeah, this kind of.
Yeah.
I'm a flatlander, man. I'm like, I'm down here at sea level. Like, I'm not used to this thin air all the time. It's right out of high school, too.
Oh, yeah.
Buttermilk always kicks my tail. So let's kind of move on to the next topic. And this is something a lot of people have kind of messaged me about personally or through Outdoor Defiance. And they want to hear about how we e-scout. Before we go into this, we're not telling you this is the only way to do it. This is how we've done it and had luck from it. We're not professionals doing it. But this is what's worked for us. So maybe take something from all of us and combine your own way. But a lot of it's more personal preference on what we look for, and than it is reasoning, I guess. But we do have reasoning behind it. Anyways, so we'll kind of break into it. Gunner and I have both done it for whitetail. Gunner's had to do it for elk and pronghorn, and Tanner's had to do it for, I'm sure, elk and pronghorn too. So we'll kind of get different ways of looking at different terrain, and hopefully we give you something to do or not to do. So this year I drew out for Kansas, and I've been catching myself, kind of studying onX, and we're not, a lot of people, are sponsored by onX by that, but there's any app that you use is great. Whatever you like, use it. We use onX and Spartan Forge. Those seem to be the two of the best I think there are. But hey, whatever works for you works for you. Google Maps works great too. Anyways, so I've been kind of pull up Kansas. Totally different terrain than what I'm used to hunting. It's rolling hills, big draws with some trees in them, mainly grass, ag field. And for this hunt specifically, it's the muzzleloader hunt. So it's the last 2 weekends of September. You're looking at total different stuff than you are, late season or rut or even mid-season or even getting into October. And, so I've been catching myself, looking for, it's probably going to be hot. I mean, I'm probably going to be miserable. The only good 2 hunts you're going to have are early morning or right at dark. So a lot of my focus, I've been looking at draws that have an easy access to bedding from food, and then there's a pond close by. And I feel like, food, we've all been taught our whole life, the 3 things you need is water, shelter, and food. And so that's kind of how I've been, looking at this spot or looking for this area. And another thing important to talk about is we all haven't been out of state. Like we're not like avid going out of state to hunt. Like we've just started kind of getting to that, and or out of state hunting, I guess is what I'm looking for. And, I've only been twice. This will be my 3rd time in Kansas. Gunner's been a handful of times. I know Russ been a handful of times. And it hadn't happened until like the last, 5 to 8 years. We really all kind of started getting into it. So we're not professionals, but this is what we look for. And it's got us either a chance at harvesting or on animals almost every time. But going back to Kansas, another thing I'm looking at is where the county roads are. And, where dead end roads are, how big the place is, how far you have to walk. And I'm trying to look at these access points as a way to get away from people. Because, I feel like from what I've heard, I haven't personally experienced it, but heard like muzzleloader and rifle in Kansas. And Tanner, I think you can talk about Wyoming in this aspect too. A lot of people just drive around till they see something and then try to put a stock on it. So I'm trying to do the opposite. I'm trying to get as far back as I can. So hopefully they put the wrong stock on it and push them to me, or I get back somewhere where a deer doesn't feel like he's pressured. So I'm trying to get back. A lot of the public land in Kansas, you're not looking at, you can't get more than like a mile or 2 back. But I also think that's going to be the difference between putting myself in a better place and just settling for a smaller deer. And so I think that's what I'm doing for Kansas. I know Gunner's gone up there a couple times, and he also drew this year for the same unit. So kind of go over what you're looking for in that unit, because, like I said, I'll be early and you'll be more late season.
Let's take a break from this podcast and talk about some awesome products.
Hey folks, let me tell you about GritKnives. They're not just your average knife company. They're all about high quality, affordable, and unique products that'll make your outdoor adventures legendary. From limited edition pocket knives to rugged fixed blades and precision scalpels, they've got it all. Plus, their logo wear will have you repping the brand wherever you go. So whether you're out in the field or tackling everyday tasks, trust GritKnives to be your go-to for top-notch gear that won't break the bank.
Are you looking for some of the best sounding turkey calls on the market? then look no farther than JAG Calls. Since 2022, Team OD has been using their calls and have had great success doing so. Two of my personal favorite calls are the Mother Clucker and the America. And I mean, if it has a name like that, it must be good. Check out JAG Calls, that's JAG Calls, out at jagcalls.com. Hey, and while you're at checkout, use OD 2024 for a discount. Once again, OD 2024 for your discount.
Now let's get back to today's episode.
Yeah. I think what gives me an advantage, even just because I've been there before. One thing that I did before I went there, so there's crop layers you can look at too, to see like what it's not going to be 100% precise, but you can get an idea of what is in the past has been planted there. So it'll show like sorghum, beans, corn layers, things like that, and that's a nice idea. And like one of the biggest things that's going to be helpful when you're going to think about this, also think about, like Taylor mentioned, like the time that you're going to be there, and like focusing in on different things. Like I'm going to be there at a completely mirror opposite time than Taylor is. Taylor's going to be super early, especially for Oklahoma guy. He's hunting before even Oklahoma season starts. I'm going to be hunting rifle, after the Oklahoma rifle season, so I'll be there in December. It's, rut's going to be tapering off. It's probably not going to be, rolling at all. I mean, there'll be in some areas, depending on ratio and stuff, there could be, some kick up and stuff, and there probably will be a little bit of kick up, but I'm going to be really focusing on, after post rut type stuff. So like travel to and from food areas, because they're going to start thinking about food again that time. I have a little bit more range than Taylor's going to have. So I'll probably focus a lot on sight, just really getting somewhere where I can see.
Right.
And then finding in between areas from that food. I could even hunt food too. It's going to depend on when I get there or when I get to scout it, when I see sign. I'm a big believer in always, understanding what you're looking at. So like when you get out there, you think about your sign that you're seeing. I've always been told for elk, don't leave elk to find elk because you're in elk, things like that. So I'm a big believer in that. For like deer in certain times of year, if you're seeing a bunch of like young bucks or whatever, and you want to go searching for that big bruiser, you may have to leave. You may have to find where he's at. But I think, like I said, understanding the time of year, I'm going to be trying to see, trying to get in between those travel routes because he's going to be going back home. That's where he's going to be going, the one I'm looking for. So I'm going to go try to find his house in between.
He's going to try to be recouping. That's another thing you're talking about food. I'm going to be trying to hunt that early Milo, and when they're still eating it pretty heavy, and then soybeans. By the time you get there, soybeans will be harvested, and it'll probably be planted in wheat or nothing. And so you're going to kind of be looking for stuff like like corn, standing corn. If it's there, that's going to be great because they'll be they'll be eating that right then around there. When I'm there, it should still be kind of soft on the cob, but they'll still be eating it. But it's like when it gets cold, and you'll be there when it's way colder. So when it gets cold, the deer will head towards grain even more. And so that's what you'll be hunting more, probably corn and wheat. But yeah, and then you're definitely trying to look at 600-700 yards max, I would think. I don't know, maybe you can go 1,000. But I'm just talking realistically. But 600-700 yards, which is still a crazy shot for a deer. And that's what you're looking for a 360. I'm looking for 150 and in. And 150 is still is going to have to be the right deal for launching the old musket at them. So, yeah, there's a lot of different stuff. Definitely, like I said, Gunner's going to have to pay attention more to access too, because when he goes there, the Orange Army's out there. I've already been there. People have had 2-3 months of muzzleloader hunting in there already, so his deer are going to be a little bit more worried about or concerned about people on edge than what I get to go into. But definitely access points of you're probably not going to see the big guy standing off the road staring at you. I mean, you might. It does happen. I'm not saying it's going to, but if you put it on like statistics wise, it's probably a little harder. But and that's kind of, I feel like that's important. I listened to a podcast today, and I've never elk hunted. I have not a single thing about it. Like I might be able to go find one, but I probably wouldn't. But I was listening to a podcast. It wasn't today. It was a few days ago. I'm sorry. And the guy was saying, and one thing he does is he circles every road that goes in there. He literally prints out the map and cuts a circle out to make it whatever the size needs to be a mile. And he circles every road or makes that outline for every mile. And then he goes through in every trailhead and every dead end road. He does 2 miles. And then he finds those little pockets where, those lines aren't touching or meeting around each other. And that's where he's found success on elk. And he was talking a lot about Colorado and Montana. And Russ, you've lived there your whole life. So I know it's kind of easier for you than, let me phrase that. It's a lot easier for you to know where your elk are than if I would show up, because it's the same way deer down here. Do you do any of that stuff for elk in Colorado, or do you just kind of go off what you're used to?
It depends. If we're hunting new areas, we'll do some of that. But honestly, I have a love-hate with onX. It's opened up a lot of hidden spots where only locals knew about, or you had to have a family member that knew about it for a long time. And so now it's opened it to where everyone can find those access spots. But as far as like you talking about trying to get off the road as far as you can, I also have a lot, or my opinion's starting to change about that pretty drastically, because now with all of the YouTube hunters and just everyone, like, I feel like a few years ago, archery started to be the cool thing to come do in Colorado for elk. And now it's not just archery, but it's archery backcountry with your backpack and your camp on your back. And that's like the cool thing everyone wants to do. Well, in my experience the last couple of years, I can speak one archery season probably 3 years ago. Me and one of my good buddies went in, and this was an area that another good friend, he had killed a bull probably 10 years ago in this spot. And it's about 11 or 12 miles off the road back to where he killed this bull. And I mean, they were covered up in elk. We went back 3 years ago, and in 2 days, we made like a 24-mile loop back in there and literally did not see a single elk track when we got that far back. The only place we saw elk sign was within a mile of the freaking trailhead.
Right.
And in my opinion, everyone thinks you have that. And I can't remember if it was, you might have asked me, Gunner, or maybe it was one of our buddies from Tennessee that was coming up here, but they asked, I think it was Ryan from Tennessee. Yeah. He asked me, he's like, how many miles do we need to get back before we're going to start getting into elk sign? And I told him, you're already on the wrong track there, buddy. Because honestly, in the last few years, I've killed just as many elk close to and I'm not saying shooting them off the road, but I'm saying within a mile of the road as I have 8 miles back off the road. Like I don't know. It's something that's changing in hunting. Animals are smart. I think everyone thinks they need to get as far off the road as they can. And maybe whitetail are different. I don't hunt whitetail very often, so I don't know. But I know with our elk and mule deer, like, they get pretty used to the roads and they just get away from pressure. So if pressure's 8 miles back, they're going to be closer,
Yeah, and that's what that guy said too. He said, you can still get them by the road. But what he was doing is, he was looking at a mile because that's kind of everyone can walk a mile. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's what he was looking at. He's looking for, and he said some of those areas that he was circling were right at a mile, but none of the trailheads met or anything like that right there, or none of the trails. He said he didn't like to walk trails. He got off the unbeaten path. And, and he brought some good points. He said sometimes, he's like, you can be able to see them from the road. You're 100% right. He said, but I want those elk that have settled in an area because there's no pressure, and I want to target them because the one that's also been by the road more times than not during archery, they've seen every person with a bugle tube sticking out their window, and he's like, I want to go back there and hit the guy that'll bugle in my face, not the one that hears it and is like, oh, heck no, and runs. Yeah. And and it's crazy to say that because in Oklahoma, or I mean anywhere, you can watch the hunting public. They talk about it. They say, used to they would go try to get far in there, but here recently in some of their videos, you can literally see cars pulling in there to hunt, and they're like, this is how it's turned. Like they're getting away from pressure, just like you said, and to do that, it's actually closer to the road.
Yeah.
And so I definitely think stuff like that changes, and so I wasn't technically saying that guy was saying he gets off the road because that's the best place.
Yeah.
But he was also going, I want to get away from what is comfortable for people.
Yeah.
And then he said, he went into detail about, I see him off the road. I have harvested them. But so, it's crazy to think that some of the bigger deer I know that have been harvested on public here in the last few years have been 50 yards off one of the roads, or 100 yards, just right up off the top. And then, hearing about or seeing all these people that you talked about that are in the backcountry hunting, and then I literally get a video from you, and you're ranging the road to make sure you're legal and going until you're off the legal point, and then sitting down and shooting. So, it's nothing we're saying is like for every case. Like there's always going to be exceptions.
Yeah.
And, something I've realized just kind of getting into this whole thing too is they're going to be where they are, until they get pushed out of a place. Typically, they're going to be in those areas. They like big old bull elk might be right there by the road. He hadn't been pushed out of there. Why is he going to leave?
Yeah.
And like same thing with, these deer and stuff. They get in areas. You just got to go find them. If you can figure out, that's what we're saying, like with the e-scouting, it's not necessarily a bread to butter, definitely 100% this is where they're at. You're more looking for core areas to start, like this area looks pretty good. This is going to give me a good chance. But you always have to get out there, especially when you get feet on the ground, be able to pivot. That's one of the biggest things people don't grasp is you have to be able to change your plan if it's not working.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to bring that up. I feel like in our experience, like you mentioned, me going to Wyoming with my brothers up antelope hunting, that was one thing. Like in being from, and I know you guys in Oklahoma get a lot of non-resident hunters too, but Colorado with our elk hunting, it's insane the amount of non-residents we get. That. But you get so many people that come here and all they do is they're completely relying on Onyx or whatever app they're using and just the e-scouting. And they think that's going to make them kill an elk. And it's not the case because in my experience up in Wyoming, we went to units that we had never stepped foot in. But the difference for me was once I found out we drew, or even before we drew, when we applied for a unit, I was looking at Onyx and tearing it apart, trying to make sure it was something we wanted to go hunt. And there was areas that we liked. There was enough public, all of that. But I can tell you both years that we've been to Wyoming, we showed up and almost everything I looked at on Onyx, like Gunnar said, having to pivot, everything it wasn't different. Like the terrain was what I thought it was going to be. But like, there was always something that just like it didn't work out where I thought was going to be a good spot. Like, like you said, it was a good starting point, got us in the general area, but even down to like camping spots, there were spots we were like, oh yeah, we're going to camp here. Get there. Oh, you can't camp there. So, I mean, everything, and you're spending all this money coming from out of state. You don't want to just rely on that. And that was why a big thing when we started applying for out of state, and I know not everyone has the time or the means to do this, but like when we draw for Wyoming, I would make sure in like a month and a half before season, we went up there and spent a weekend because I didn't want to just rely on e-scouting. I wanted to, like you said, get boots on the ground and know like, hey, I've been here. I mean, we're not there at the same time as the animals, so not as much like scouting the actual animals, but at least knowing the country a little bit because that's a big thing. Like you always talk about elk hunting being easier for me here in Colorado than like for you guys. Yeah, it's because I've walked every mile of this stuff around me. Like I'm going to find the elk because I know the country, and that's a huge thing. And so I do agree, Onyx or any of the apps, it's a great way to start learning the country, but it definitely doesn't replace getting boots on the ground, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's another thing I've been doing is I've been breaking it up. I'm going through and marking several locations, and I have my red pins to show like, hey, this could be good. But then my green pins are like, hey, that looks like money. And And then we talked about going to put the boots in the ground. Some people, if you're, say, you live in Florida and you're going to go hunt in Colorado, it's probably going to be hard to go look. You're probably going to have to go in blind.
Yeah.
But what I'm getting to is make sure if you're using the app or one of these apps, have multiple points. Don't rely on one, because as soon as you get in there, there's going to be 10 other people in there. As soon as you get in there, there's not going to be anything there. And rolling into that will be the next subject here in a minute. But, going to Kansas, I'm using my colored pens to rank areas of, man, this looks good. Oh, that looks pretty good. And then if I don't like it, I'm not marking it. And, in some places, if it's like a 50-50, I go ahead and mark it and it's like a blue. And that's like, so if I get there and every place is hunted, I'm like, all right, what's my next move? So, it's kind of, I have my puzzle pieces all scattered, and you want to start out with your straight edges first, and then you build in the middle. And that's what I'm doing with my green pins, is those are my edges. That's where I feel comfortable. That's where I've had success finding deer here. That's where I've seen people in videos do it. And so, yeah, you definitely need to have different points of interest before you go in there with one point. And, and that's another thing we talked, we're rolling into is, you guys said, Gunner said a little bit, don't leave elk to find elk. And I'm a little bit different in that. And that's fine, because we all hunt, different. And that's what I like doing these podcasts for, because we can all hear everyone's point. When it comes to elk, I have no idea. So I don't know what I would do in elk. I probably wouldn't leave elk, because I would probably be looking for the smallest little guy legal. I'd be like, oh, he looks legal, I'm shooting him. But when it comes to deer, I kind of know. So if I'm hunting an area, especially early season, I'm seeing a lot of young deer, a lot of does, and I bring this back to when I went to Nebraska. We were there for 9 days, and we were on deer almost every day, but we couldn't find a big one. And I went with Kyle, and then Gunner was up there with Gage and Newell, and they were in a different area, and we hunted completely different. Me and Kyle's whole mindset were, when we get there, our wheels not stopped, our feet aren't done moving until we find something to shoot. That's our whole goal. When we went there, we were settled for an area, and we got to the area, weren't seeing anything, talked to a couple people, went to Bass Pro, which any sporting sport there or anywhere, they'll give you a little bit of information, but don't 100% listen to it, because sometimes people try to run you out. Sometimes they just lie to you. But anyway, so we went to Bass Pro, talked to some people while we were trying to get some stuff, and they all had the same conclusion, like there's no deer in there. So we left. And so we went from, we're going to stay in this area, and me and Kyle made a plan. We're going to give an area 1 or 2 days, 2 good hunts. If we're not seeing it, we're moving. And a lot of that was because pressure. We were running into people. Everywhere we went, there was someone, or someone had something negative to say, or there was just no sign. And I think a lot of people get stuck in that. And like I said, I'm not speaking on elk. I'm speaking on my preference for deer. If I go to area and I'm only seeing, and it's been a lot, if it's been heavily pressured and I see a lot of does and I'm not seeing racks, and I hunt there once, I'll give it 2 or 3 times, I'm leaving. And, and a lot of people are like, wow, that's crazy. But it's worked for me. I mean, Nebraska, I didn't shoot anything huge, but I came home with a pretty decent deer that we worked hard for. But that was the biggest darn deer we saw on public ground up there the whole trip up there. We saw some giants on public. Or my mindset is go until I see something that's closer to what I want, and then stay there.
I think, yeah, and it, like you were saying, I think that's a good exception for leaving something, especially understanding your time of year. If you're you're hunting like a rut season and you're seeing does, you probably want to keep checking back in with them. If you're hunting like we were doing in December and all we're seeing is does and dinks, you probably want to go out. If you have something else you want to, and I say dinks, you can shoot what you want, people. But if if your inkling is to harvest a bigger deer on one of these trips, and you're in like a December hunt, and you're not seeing a whole lot of deer that you would consider a deer you would harvest, probably want to go searching, because they're probably in a different area, because it's understanding your time of year is big. And like Taylor said, he wasn't seeing anything he wanted to shoot. He was seeing a bunch of does and, bucks that he didn't want to harvest, and it was December. So you're not just going to sit on them, because obviously those other deer are in different areas, especially that time of year. So
Well, that and also how long you have to hunt. I think that's a huge
Yeah.
conclusion to make. Going into Kansas, I'm going to have 2 good weekends, and I start a new job. Don't have much PTO. I probably won't have any PTO then. Might have a couple hours. Whoop-de-doo. It's not going to change much, right? So I work Monday through Thursday. Plan is Thursday night leaving. I'm going to hunt Friday, Saturday, Sunday, leave Sunday night, get home, repeat for 2 weekends. So I'm getting, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 6 days to hunt off a 2-week season. In Oklahoma, I have October to January, so I'm a little bit more laid back, a little more cautious, not really pressuring. But you give me 6 days and it's come home with nothing or harvest something. My only goal, like I love going places and hanging out with my friends, and I don't mean this in any rude way. My only goal when I go on a hunt is to fill my tag. I love the memories. When we're at camp, we're making memories. But when I'm out in the field, my goal is to fill that tag, and that's the way my mind is. And there's exceptions. If we did, went on more friend hunts or stuff like that, I would give a little more exceptions. But my mind for Kansas, it's 4 hours, 4 to 6 hours, depending where I go, away. I got 6 days to hunt. It's pretty darn close. So I'm going to get there and scout. I'll probably scout July, and I'll probably go back hopefully the week or 2 weeks before season and see what's planted, see how it's coming up, all that, and kind of just start dotting all the I's on what I want to do, and then go back, and then that's what I'm going to go until I find the deer that I want. And and it's worked for me. It worked for me in Nebraska. I can't really take claim to the turkey hunt in Colorado because that was 100% luck. And so I can't say anything about that. And other than that, that's the only 2 things I have to go off of. And that's what my only 2 hunts. So that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah. When we went, we were different. I just wanted to hunt the sandhills pretty badly. That's just, we put up, you guys were in a couple hotels, weren't you?
Yeah. Kyle travels so much. He gets comped rooms. So we definitely use that up.
Yeah, I have a tent, a pretty nice one, Kodiak, and we had a enclosed trailer and stuff, and we lucked out because the place we stayed at had electricity. So we had electric heaters in there. It was 10 degrees a night, and it was 70 in that tent, dude. So we were pretty content of just hunting the hills. We ended up getting lucky. I did. Gage and Newell slept in one morning, and I said, well, I'm not wasting a morning. So I roll out there, and I just see a couple does walk over a hill in this corner. I'm like, we're coming back here. The day before, just the day before, first day we found deer. Second day we did not find a soul. That third day I was there, I found those deer going over that hill onto the private, and I was like, I got to come back here. And we came back there, and it just the gates opened up. There were deer everywhere coming on and off. They were tough to kill. They were really tough to harvest because of how they used that property line. Mm-hmm. And there, weren't a whole lot of just deer that got my blood going either. We ended up the last evening finding one that I was like, yeah, I want to go after that deer. But we didn't want to pack up tent was the biggest thing.
Absolutely.
That was our biggest thing for staying there the whole time. But
yeah, we had 2 suitcases and left everything else in his locked truck bed. So mobile was easy for us. We could go somewhere. All we had to do is, hey, this town has a hotel that you're comp for. Let's go there. Kansas, my goal there is I found a couple hotels that are cheap. But, I'm going to see how hot it is. I'll wait closer time to kind of make that plan. Because there's a chance if I'm not seeing what I want, the next piece, my first place and my second place are 40, 50 miles apart. So if I go pay for 2 hotel rooms at this place, now I have over an hour drive to get to the other place the next morning and back. So I'm going to have to figure out what to do there. I'm going to wait till closer to season. And so definitely a lot of that depends on, how you're set up to hunt. If you're going to sleep from your truck, you're pretty darn mobile. If you're going to sleep in a hotel that's comped and you don't have to put reservations on it, you're pretty darn mobile.
There's a wildlife class or something online that you can do with Remy and the meat eater guys, and I watch some of that Onyx stuff, and it gets confusing. You go down a rabbit
Yeah.
hole with those guys. It's crazy.
That's why I use Onyx a lot for like elk hunting here, because when it comes to rifle season, I can look on there, and I love the feature where you can like the rangefinder deal where you can see how
yeah.
far it is in places. So like it's perfect for us because I can know like if we go up in this draw, am I going to be able to shoot across that draw, or if I get on that side, am I completely like it's way like yeah, I might see elk over there, but am I going to be able to shoot from there, or do I have to get there and then figure out a way to get closer to them? Because like a lot of the stuff we hunt, if I go up in this draw and I'm on this side and I see elk on the other side, by the time I get to them, they're going to be gone. So like it's nice to know, is it worth going there?
Right.
But with Onyx, I can see that distance right away. And it might not be perfect, but at least get you in the ballpark and knowing like, hey, if I get to this knob, might be able to get a shot.
But like, Nebraska, that deer jumped off private onto public, and when he disappeared over that sand hill, and I want to go back. That's kind of a point I was going to say too. When you talk about 100% changing something, when I went to Nebraska, we were going to go after mule deer. And then day 6, I was like, Kyle, I'm done. We're going to go down the river bottom and we're going to find a dang whitetail because I'm tired of these darn mule deer. So anyway, so we went down there, and then that first day we were down there, that one jumped over and it came running and went over a hill. And that's what we did, is like pulled up that hill, marked it immediately because every dang hill out there looks the same. And I was like, all right, I know he went over that one. I think he followed this way, because if he went the other ways, he would have to crest the 2 bigger hills. So it was cool to see that and have to work that out in the moment. And so, yeah, definitely what you just said, like getting a kind of like a bird's eye of what's there before you head over there makes it a little easier in circumstances.
You can do a feature on Google Earth called like flyover.
Mm-hmm.
So you can like set it up and it'll like fly you over the area you want to look at. And it's pretty decent. Like if you just are like bored and want to look over this area in 3D or whatever, you can turn on like topo or whatever, and it'll fly you over a certain area and give you different angles, and that gives you an okay look at things. It might give you a nice place to start as well.
Right. Like in Kansas, I have to use the topo map a little more because it's a lot different terrain than what we're used to hunting. So I'm trying to look at grass going, is that a hill or is that just tall grass?
It's hilly there. It's hilly where you're going.
So I've been using the topo a lot and finding these draws and finding out what's steep, and if I think something's too steep for a deer to walk up, or because a lot of times people are going to hear that and be like, that's crazy, deer will walk up anything. And that's right, but in September these deer are still lazy. They still have one thing in mind, it's just to get fat and eat and live life, and there's no does in heat yet, so that doesn't turn everything 360 degrees against me. So I'm kind of we know that deer like to take the easy way out, so I'm kind of watching for that, and we'll see how it goes.
I'll say another feature I love on Onyx now, and I'm sure most of the apps have it, but being able to do like the 3D and being able to, I can be standing somewhere and looking up a draw, and I can kind of slide up there and have the 3D on and look, and I can be like, me standing down here, it might look like, oh, that ridge is going to be in the way of me to be able to see to that next ridge. But with that 3D, you can zoom in and look up and be like, oh, no. And it might not be 100% accurate. You might mess up a couple times, but like it gives you an idea of like, are you going to be able to see over that ridge to the next one when you get to that spot? And I know that's been very helpful for me around here in the mountains for sure.
I definitely think, if you're going to take anything from this, the key points would be definitely put your time in, computer, your phone, whatever. Get on X, Google Maps. Another thing I've heard is like the National Forest maps. They actually tell you like what the boundaries are, like what creek, what draw. And so if you really want to pull those up, you can really familiarize yourself with those and kind of understand more of the layout. And you definitely need to spend some time understanding where you're going before you go on blind. Because I think anymore, if you're going somewhere blind, you're not putting yourself in the best position to harvest something. And that's my main goal right now, because I haven't done it a lot. I think, as I get older, it'll be more taking my family, taking my friends, my kids, and making more of a base camp out of it and hanging out than it is where I am now. But, I think, definitely pull it up. You need to figure out the time of year, what those animals are eating that point. Are they going to rely on water? Because they're always going to rely on water, but December and September are two different months. One's hot and one usually pretty cold. And so I don't think just like us, when we're cold, we don't want to drink as much as when we're burning up, working in the sun. That's kind of how these deer are going to be. So you need to figure out figure out the food they're relying on that time of year, kind of what you like to hunt. If you're hunting, if it came to elk, I'm telling you, I would have no idea. Water source, if they're relying on it, and what season it's going to be. If it's going to be rut, if it's going to be early season, late season. So you got to put all those factors in it. But more importantly, you got to get there. You got to look at all this stuff, because don't rely on a map. Because once you get there, even when Russ was down here, I found an awesome place to deer hunt on public land. We rolled up and the fence was like 200 yards off. So we were like, holy cow, that's far off. And so definitely putting the boots on the ground. And then I think being a big one for me would definitely, when you get there, being ready to be like, this place sucks, let's leave. And don't waste days, hours, time just sitting there like in hopes. Because even like elk, I mean, if the elk aren't there, they're not there. They've already moved. And deer are not as nomadic as elk or mule deer are, but you got to think about that stuff too. If you're not seeing anything, get out. If you are seeing stuff, that's like a double-edged sword. You got to figure out what you want, and if it's me on an elk, I'm probably going to stay there because I'm on elk. I'm from Oklahoma. I don't want to walk anymore. But if it's me on deer and I'm only seeing does and spikes and it's late season or early season, I'm going to move because they're still bachelored up, and I'm going to go find the bachelor group that I want.
Yeah. In the mountains, I'm going to say this, but take it with a grain of salt because I've been proved wrong. Understand the time of year, and like elevation can play a key role, but at the same time, in some areas it doesn't as much. I've learned, because I've been told by 100 locals in an area, you got to get up to 9,000 feet. They're at 10,000 feet, and I'm seeing them at 6. Like you just understand what elevation can do. I mean, obviously, if there's a bunch of snow up top, they're going to be pushed down. Understand that. But different elk and different deer are going to do different things. You just got to, it goes back, just go hunt them, get after them.
That's one thing I heard. The guy was like, yeah, I've been in towns and the locals are like, we killed one for the last 4 years in this area. He said, I go up there and I don't see anything. And I think a lot of people from south or from the southern states go up there and they're going to sit on a meadow, because that's what we do here. We sit somewhere and they're going to come out eventually. Something's going to come out eventually. And I think a lot of people get in that mindset when they go out of state, something's going to come out eventually. Hey, they might not even be in there. They might be 6 miles from you, and we're just not used to that. And I think that's where a lot of people need to learn, like, hey, we got to move. We can't listen to the guy, because some guy could have gone there for 10 years straight and harvested them. But that year you're there, it could be a little warmer, it could be a little colder, and that changes everything on those animals. So, yeah, there's a lot to think about. Like I said, I definitely think, studying your maps, being ready to be proven wrong, and keep pushing forward. Like I said, keep as many points as you can, and be ready to. No, I can't stress as much. Be ready to fail, but just keep putting the work in, and I think you have a better chance to succeed. I hope you guys heard something you didn't know from this podcast. Like I said, we just kind of new to this, so that question, I feel like that's kind of a broad question to ask. But there's just a lot of things you can do. It's been, circled back on several times on what we do, or what I kind of look at, what Gunnar looks at, and what Russ looks at. And so I hope that helped you guys. Thanks for listening. Comment, leave your review, and go follow us. Deuces.